So welcome everybody. Welcome to our webinar today titled Creating Effective Minutes for Your Board Meetings. My name's Sean McDonald and I'll be your moderator for the next 45 minutes. And firstly, before we start, thanks so much for attending today. We really appreciate the effort you've made to be here live. During the session, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen or on your toolbar, wherever that is. And we'll be answering these questions as we go throughout the session, and as many of those as we have time for. And finally, if you stayed through till the end, which we hope you will do, and as is customary for our webinars, we have a special treat. By answering our really short survey at the end of the webinar, you'll go in the draw to win our beautiful gift hamper worth over $400. Now, for those who are a little bit unsure or unaware of Board Pro, we are a board software provider, sometimes called a board portal, and we serve around 25,000 users around the world in about 23 countries now, I believe. And we enable organizations to prepare for and run their board meetings more efficiently and effectively with clever software, of course, with less time, and deliver more impact and value for the organization. And as much as we're a board software provider, part of our wider mission is to make the fundamentals of governance free and easy to implement for all organizations, especially those with resource constraints. And one of the ways we do this is by providing free access to over 200 business templates, guides, and resources, which you'll find in the resource center of our website. And these webinars, for example, are also a great way of accessing our key governance knowledge without the time commitment and costs associated with the old in-person events. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our speaking panel, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves, starting with you, Jen.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you, Sean. I'm Jen Butler, and it says they're Managing Director of Absolute Gems. The webinar today is one of my favourites because it does impart some of the value that we at Absolute Gems bring to your board as professional board secretaries. And I'm so pleased to be doing this with Danica and Joe as well. So welcome. Thank you.
Danica, you're next.
Well, kia ora koutou, everyone. Hello, I'm Danica McLean and I run a company called Board Administration Services. We provide bespoke services for boards, putting in contract board secretaries, helping with board software implementation, organising board strategy offsites, and just really anything to do with your governance framework and requirements.
Thanks, Danica. And Joe, over to you.
Kia ora. I'm Jo Kelly, CEO and founder of Independent Governance Services. We're a team of 7, and like the others, we provide board secretarial services, which can be a whole range of things, including minute taking through to creating board policies and charters and all of that great stuff in between, helping boards stay on track. So delighted to be here today and share some gems with you guys.
Pardon the pun.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, team. Okay, so for the next 40-odd minutes, listen, relax, add to the discussion by asking as many questions as you can or as feel inclined to. A full recording of the webinar along with the slides that we're going to be taking you through today, the white paper and the minute-taking template and resources will be sent to you later on today, maybe early tomorrow morning. So let me hand over to you, Jen.
Wonderful. So thanks, Sean. You're obviously here today because you do understand that minutes are really important. They are important for a number of reasons. Firstly is, that most people think of as compliance. Secondly, it's a historical record of, what you need to look back on for strategy, perhaps, or perhaps even new directors and things coming on board. But technically, as the slide says, to fill our compliance requirements, it allows us to complete legislative requirements, shows cultural changes in the company and the phases, etc., for your everyday history for minutes. What's the next slide, Sean? Integrity and thoroughness of process. So We're remembering that your minutes are kept. Now, I saw we've got Australia and Canada and one from Malaysia, which I don't have the information on, but in Australia, it's 5 years that you're required to keep your minutes for. 6 years in Canada and New Zealand, it's actually 7 years. 10 years in the UK, and anywhere from 2 to 7 years you're required to keep your minutes for in the USA. And if you're working as a trust, those minutes need to be kept indefinitely in your minute book. So it's a good reminder to know the rules in your particular country, right? So the minutes provide an excellent history of decisions. Are you really going to remember the context and the process that was used in making the decisions many years after the fact? You know, up to 10 years in the UK, I doubt that anyone's got a memory that good. So this is also the minutes can be used as a letter to the judge. And so I have a number of times where this has actually happened, and I can talk a lot about those. But as Sean reminds me every time I do these webinars, that I need to keep it really succinct and the things that you need to know. So we do delve into that in the masterclass that Board Pro put on of taking effective board minutes. It's also really important for due diligence. You know, incoming directors need to be able to see the deliberations and the considerations that the board is making in terms of their due diligence. Is this a board that they want to be involved with? Do they feel that the decision-making processes are robust enough for them to come on as a director? I always liken it to it's a bit like a math exam, really. It's about showing your workings. You know, it's the judge isn't just looking for the right answer. They're looking to ensure that a robust process was taken when making decisions. And those are the main reasons why we take the minutes the way that we do. I think Danica and Joe, you'd agree that those are the main reasons.
Yeah. Also, if you're looking to sell your business or go through an IPO or list on the stock market, those minutes are one of the crucial documents that are examined, normally going back 5 years. Potential buyers will look to see if there are any gaps and to see all of the decision-making processes that have kind of gone through in the company's history.
Agree. And also likewise, audit purposes is often where minutes can trip you up or keep you in line, make life easy.
So true, Joe, so true. What's our next? We've already got to the next slide there. Fantastic, Sean, thank you. No, one back, thanks. We all know that every set of minutes should have an interests register. If you don't, put your hand up, because it's really important that every board, particularly if you are a company, has an interests register. And I think that there's now a requirement for incorporated societies to have an interest register as well under the new Act. It's required in New Zealand by Section 140 of the Companies Act, Section 191 of the Corporations Act in Australia, and 162 of the Companies Act in the UK. We deal with a lot of different governance tools, right from the old-fashioned Word document through to Board Pro, Diligent, and a number of governance tools. And Board Pro does this exceptionally well, because it allows each individual person to manage their own interests, and also allows the board secretary to manage the interests directly from the meeting, which is really useful. Now, how those conflicts of interest are managed is really up to each of your boards. Sean, we've got a question there.
I have a couple. I'll put this one first. So Michelle asks, I put this in the Q&A, but probably should have put it here. Oh, sorry. I'm a bit confused, says Michelle. I've recently done some research on retention requirements, and the Corporations Act states that the agenda and minutes must be kept permanently while the company operates. Question.
Now, I think Sorry, Jen.
Go ahead, Danica. No, you take
I was
that.
just going to say, in this modern age, all of these should be digital anyway, and there's not really any reason to archive or get rid of those minutes. You should just be keeping them with your board papers kind of in perpetuity. But certainly if you understand your local legislation and that's what it states, then by all means, that's what you should be following.
And did you have another one?
I do. It's a little bit off center a little bit. This comes from Joe. Are you able to talk about the pros and cons of using ChatGPT or other AI platforms for generating board minutes? I don't know if we cover that on this session, but we certainly do on our masterclasses, right?
Yeah, we certainly do. The very short and succinct answer, so we can get back on track, is you can use AI to create board minutes, but they won't be near as effective as the knowledge and experience that a board secretary has. In terms of doing that, you also putting your IP into a cloud space. So please, if you are using anything like that, make sure it is closed and localized to your company. I don't suggest it. It becomes everything that goes into that system, it becomes discoverable. So just like recording minutes, I don't suggest that either, because again, legally, that is completely discoverable. And the purpose of taking minutes isn't to have a transcript. It isn't to be he said, she said. The purpose is to ensure that the decisions and the decision-making processes are well laid out, that the culture and the history of the business is recorded. And when you're recording everything, particularly if you do it all the time, directors and other people involved tend to get complacent and say things that really should not be recorded. So I don't like it. Danica and Joe, do you have a quick opinion on that?
Yeah, I've got a slightly different opinion. I've actually run the masterclass on AI in board administration, and some of those board meeting services like Jamie, like Otter AI, like Fireflies, have very strict privacy and security provisions within them. They can be really efficient at helping to take notes, depending on what level of meeting you have. If you're kind of running a steering committee or a project group, those minutes can be fantastic that they produce. But at a board level, it's probably a bit more nuanced for each company. And I've found through all of the different systems that I've used that none of them can kind of compare to actually having a board secretary be taking those minutes. The question on ChatGPT is it's a layered one, because you can get ChatGPT Enterprise version, which is a downloaded version within your company. It's not open to the internet. It's just there on the desktop, and that can be used. If you're using kind of the free one that's going online, you should absolutely not be putting any identifiable information on there.
Do you have a view on that,
Beautiful.
Joe?
No, beautifully answered. Covers it all.
So if we just go back one slide, one slide, Sean. So talking about conflicts of interest here and how they're recorded. So it is really difficult. And again, you do need to know your legislation in your region. And I can't stress that enough, because New Zealand, Australia, Canada, US, Malaysia, they're all going to be very different, maybe not very different, but they're all going to be different about how they actually deal from a legalities side with conflicts. For example, in New Zealand, a director cannot be asked to leave the room with the Companies Act, and they can offer to leave the room, but you can't ask them to. They are actually entitled to participate in the conversation and entitled to vote, according to Section 144 of the New Zealand Companies Act. In Australia, Section 194 says that you can participate in the decision and vote if it's a disclosed interest, and in the UK, there isn't actually a corresponding rule. So both of those can be changed in a constitution and as a replaceable rule, which is through Australia and New Zealand. In New Zealand, public companies people cannot be present, the directors or the trustees cannot be present, and they cannot vote. So unless the unconflicted directors pass a specific resolution saying that they can actually be present, discuss the conflicted matter and or vote. So knowing your rules, knowing your constitution is really important here in terms of conflicts of interest. Now, if a director does vote against a motion, it should be recorded. And I'm sure that Joe and Danica, you both do this as well. It may not absolve the director from the responsibility, but it will help build a story for any judge that is looking at your minutes, which could potentially protect that director from, from the decision, should it be subject to legal scrutiny. But the board is one natural person, and the decisions that the board make, whether you've agreed with them or not, are culpable by the entire board.
Yeah, so on that, Jen, so the board does make the decision, and all board members have to abide by that decision once the board makes it.
Yes.
If it's a simple vote and some don't agree and some do agree, I don't think you do need to record that. I think you just record if a director specifically states that they want it stated on the record.
Yeah.
And,
yes,
and then that would be dissent, recorded as dissenting, or
that's right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I typically tend to record the decision, as you say, Danica, if the director asks for the dissent to be recorded. But you're right, it doesn't need to be recorded if the director doesn't ask for that dissent to be recorded. Right, here we go to the next slide. This one here, protecting organisational director reputation. Now,
I think we might need one slide further.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right. I think we're here. So this one here, responsibility to and tracking implementation. So Board Pro's automated actions list, for me, it's an absolute godsend, rather than having to chase everybody with the actions. Danica and Joe, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, once you start using that, it's very difficult to go back. It just takes care of the whole follow-up process. People can update their own actions. It's there for the whole board to see, so there's clear accountability. It makes life so much easier as a board secretary.
Yeah, it really does. Anything automated like this is just beautiful. And also in the case of when you're using a board secretary service like what the three of us provide, it saves our clients money because we don't have to charge for the time that we're chasing people. So it's brilliant.
Absolutely. 100% agree with that, Joe. And that's what we're about, isn't it? Creating efficiencies. Sean, you've got a question there.
I do. One in from Henri. This is a double up of another question earlier. How do you deal with the board that does not reflect the minutes accurately?
Oh, so yeah, I think as a board secretary, our job, and this is my opinion, so I will certainly go to Joe and Danica as well. My job is to record what was said, not what should have been said. So the only way that the minutes will change is if the chair directs me to make changes to the minutes, because ultimately the minutes are the responsibility of the board and the chair is responsible for the board. Joe?
Yeah, it's a board conversation. If they don't agree with what's in the draft minutes, then they're open for discussion, and as a board they can discuss and they can agree how they should be amended, and then the minutes can be approved subject to those amendments. So everyone should have a chance to view the minutes before they're approved and be able to submit their feedback. If they don't agree with it, they can raise that, and that's up to the board and the chair to manage.
And we do spend a lot of time doing this, don't we? Well,
Yeah.
actually not a lot of time, but some boards like to make more changes than others. And often you find it's interesting that people's memories can be different. And so, things like getting your minutes out really quickly helps to sort of prevent disagreements, for example. And I think also one of the benefits of having a independent board secretary or minute taker is that you don't have that bias coming into the minutes where somebody records something that they, as you said, Jen, would like to have heard. rather than
Correct.
what was actually agreed. So yeah.
And perhaps somebody's been overzealous in estimating their timeframes that have been recorded in the minutes and things like that. That often is a point of contention.
Yeah.
But getting back to the actions lists, as a board secretary, it can be really difficult because determining what things are actually actions. So I always say, don't be afraid to speak up and clarify whether it is an action. And while you've got the attention of the chair, ask, who's responsible for the action and when the board expects that action to be done. There are times where you don't want to interrupt the flow, so it's always good to catch the chair right at the end of your meeting. If you're meeting online, just make sure that you do actually catch up with that, with the chair 5 minutes after the meeting's finished, and you can clarify all those things nice and quickly rather than waiting till a bit later. So where are we going now? Basis for evaluation and review. There we go. So decisions recorded in the minutes can help with strategy and planning. Did we apply our values to the decisions that we made last year? Did we make decisions that promoted the strategy that we agreed to? Are the topics we're discussing at our meetings helping progress our strategy? And was there anything missing? So it's really great to do the post-decision evaluation and to think about that in line with your strategy, I find. Now, Danica, Joe, do you want to chime in on this one? No? Great. There we go, Sean.
A lot of content to get through, so happy
yes,
with that.
that's right. We can move right through.
A lot of questions coming in.
Yeah, there are. So let's try and make some a bit more time than what we usually would for questions, considering there's so many coming through. So in terms of facilitating due diligence, induction and audit, it is important for a company adding a new director to be really professional. So this is where your board secretary can make a big difference, ensuring that the new director has a letter of appointment, that the induction is really well thought out. Board Pro is fantastic because it keeps all of your documents in there. Stella and Diligent also do the same thing. They have a repository for your documents where you can actually create a whole induction folder with all of the pertinent information and links now through Board Pro, just linking straight into the induction information. And it's making the informed decisions and showing the culture of the board through the minutes. And that's another lens that the minutes, when you're taking the minutes, it should be viewed through. Do these minutes really reflect the culture of this board? Do we lead from the top in terms of how we want our culture to be seen? Okay, document organizational evolution. I think we've talked a little bit about history and why it's good to make sure that those historical moments are captured in the minutes. So we'll just move through. What have we got? Some midterm questions there. Okay, who should take the minutes? I guess here it's more like who should not take the minutes. Yes, I can see that resonates with Danica and Joe as well. So the CEO of a board should certainly not be taking the minutes because they have an invested interest. The board is there to hold the CEO accountable, and the board has its own minutes separate as a governance function from operations. So it is a real big no-no from me to have your CEO taking the minutes.
They also can't participate properly in the meeting if they're trying to do that at the same time. So
and that's true of directors as well, Joe, isn't it? I'll just chime in here because quite often, if you are from a not-for-profit or a charitable organisation or even a small community organisation, it often falls to the woman in the group to take the minutes if you don't have a professional board secretary. And they don't have the training, but they're efficient and effective and they get the job done. So the task of taking minutes gets allocated to them. So, it's really important to recognise that they're on the board for a reason and they need to participate as well. And it's really difficult to do that when you are taking the minutes. So I guess sorry, Joe, Danica, do you want to pop in there?
I can just add personal experience there. I sit on a board, and for some of the committee meetings, I've taken notes, and I can just attest to how difficult it is to actively listen to the discussions that are taking place while you're kind of formulating responses and thinking about the comments that you want to make, as well as kind of noting down what's being said objectively. It's really difficult. You do get kind of quite conflicted in your own biases.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that second point where the minute taker should be sufficiently confident to query what's being discussed. Again, you do need to have the confidence to put your hand up and say, can I confirm that this is the final decision? Because quite often, there's a male minute taker there. I just want to applaud you, and I think you're just awesome. Thank you. You know, it is important to make sure that you do get the right decision locked in, because sometimes we can have a lot of circular conversations and you can lose track quite a bit of time, you know, if you're not as experienced as what the three of us are in determining that. And even we get confused sometimes once the conversation's gone on for quite some time. So do be brave and interrupt the meeting. Excuse me, Mr. Chair, can I just confirm, or Ms. Chair, can I please confirm that this is the final decision?
Also, I've had a chair I've worked with recently who gave me a great tip, and he said at the end of the meeting, we'll go back and Joe can go through all the actions and decisions we've made, and we can just confirm. And then it's actually been a beautiful way to do it. You spend about 10 minutes at the end and get all those corrections out of the way. So that's another option there.
Yeah, fabulous. There's you know, a lot of people are still doing these old-fashioned things in meetings as well, you know, moving the motion and seconding the motion, and all in favor, ayes and nays against, and things like that. So if it's not specifically in your constitution that you do need a mover and a seconder, I highly suggest taking a modern approach and moving to an inclusive decision-making process, which is, you know,
Unanimous.
Yeah. If you want to have a look at Stephen Moe has got a really fantastic paper on the inclusiveness of moving and seconding, as not moving and seconding rather.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that comes from the Roberts Rules, which was a set of instructions about how meetings should be run. That was written in 1876. So it's fair to say it's a bit outdated these days.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. So what should be in the minutes? Now, this is probably the crux of where we're getting to. Now, I think I'll give some really short bullet point tips here, and then invite Danica and Joe to add their top tips and things like that. We should be referring to titles and not names in our minutes. We should have all of those standard things that are listed in the basics down below: the title, the date, time, venue, etc. What should not be included? We shouldn't be including conversations around human resources, people, issues, and anything that could be pulled up legally. We need to be very, very careful about how those things are recorded. We need to steer away from the management and the operations conversations and getting into the weeds. If it's not a decision topic, then the actual minute should be very short and succinct rather than long and drawn out. You might need a little bit longer minute when you are describing the decision-making process, and particularly all the options that the directors have considered before making the decision. But if it's just for information or a talking point, a presenter or a guest that's come to speak to the board, a very, very short minute is all that's required. Joe, let's go to you.
Agree with all that. I think also sometimes there are regulatory and other requirements for more lengthy minutes. And for example, if you're an education body and you get audited and you need to provide evidence of how you've dealt with an issue, you're going to take some longer minutes. But otherwise, less is best is sort of the approach we tend to take, ensuring you're really clearly recording actions and decisions, and especially, like you said, Jen, with more material decisions, you do want a bit of context around that. I find, and another thing I find that people struggle with when taking minutes is that they'll often record things that make sense at the time, but when you're looking back 6 months later, you've forgotten the context around those points. And it's really important to do a final review of your minutes and go back and add in all the context you need to support those decisions, so that I put on a lens of coming to the minutes and reviewing them as someone who's never been a part of this organization, and would I understand what's being said here? And that final review is really important in terms of actually recording things correctly in the minutes, I think.
That's a really good point, Jo. Just knowing who your audience is, I think, and will they understand this as an outsider? Certainly different industries have different requirements depending on who the audience is of who's going to be viewing the minutes, and I think that you kind of have to tweak things depending on that in terms of how substantive you make the detail.
I agree, and a fabulous point of know your audience. I mean, also have that conversation with your chair. Find out what they expect. You know, it's quite interesting after having conversation with a number of chairs that they literally say the shorter the minutes, the better, you know, because who's got time to read 10 pages of minutes when you've got a 60-page board pack to be getting through to start with, you know, of the actual substantial information. So it's making sure that it is succinct enough, but also, to your point, Jo, that it does actually have the correct and accurate recording of the decisions and the processes made to make those decisions, and the information that is going to refresh the directors' minds for 6 months down the track, or give a director who's not there a really good insight as to what has happened during the meeting. So the lenses to review the minutes. Now, this is one of my favorite pages. So deciding what is important is really hard. That's the hardest part of our job, I think, is deciding what to include in the minutes and what not to. Until you get to that point where you are really experienced and you can actually just easily discern what goes in, particularly when you have been working with a board for a long period of time as well, and you know them and you know their industry. But I always, for anybody else who's out there, determining what goes in, I always ask myself this question: does this add value, and does it really need to be there? So when you do ask that hard question of, does this really need to be there? Quite often, you know, you kind of say to yourself, I've just written this really great paragraph though, and you reread it and you think, yeah, but doesn't actually need to be there, so you can take it out. Danica.
Yeah, I think I won't comment because I think there are a lot of questions coming through, so it'll save comment for that maybe.
Sounds like a good idea. Let's just move through to the next slide. How long should the minutes be? Often items of information only need one line. As I was saying, you know, the board received an update from, or the board you know, received the paper, and that's all that needs to be there, because it's just for information. If there is lengthy discussion, you can actually just put your one-liner, the board received the update and the following points were noted, and then just pop in a couple of bullet points just to give that fleshing out and reminder of any discussion that was had. It's really important for you as a board secretary to read the board pack well before you go in. So I always adopt what we call as the read, skim, read. So or skim, read, skim is so skim them through as soon as they come through, give them a really good read before the board meeting, and then skim them again directly before the board meeting, so that you're really au fait. Board Pro and a couple of the other products have the ability to mark up your board pack with all of the things that you need to talk about beforehand as a director. But you can also do that as a board secretary as well, of the things that you need to ask questions about or that you need to record. So it's really useful. Let's go through preparing and finalising the minutes. The board of directors doesn't, this is a really controversial topic, so I'm really going to be interested to hearing what Danica and Joe say. According to the New Zealand Companies Act, Schedule 3.6, there's no requirement for the minutes to be signed. There's no legal requirement in Canada or any federal regulation in the US. However, most states do have a requirement for signing. Australia, you must sign the minutes within a reasonable time following the meeting, and that has to be within 1 month. And that's in section 251A. And in the UK, section 249 says that they must be authenticated. So whether that means they actually have to be physically signed or whether they can simply just be confirmed at the following meeting is a bit contentious as well. So Danica, what's your experience here? Do you get your minutes physically signed?
I do for a couple of boards that I work for, and I don't for others. It's really down to what the company wants and expects. Here in New Zealand, as you say, we don't need to. And especially if you're using something like Board Pro that locks the approved minutes, then I don't feel like it's necessary.
Joe?
Concur. Sometimes we sign by e-signature. Sometimes boards just prefer to sign because maybe they're old school or whatever, but there isn't a requirement. I agree with that. And Board Pro covers it off anyway. It's an e-sign. You've got your resolution in the next set of minutes that you've approved the previous ones. So
yes, absolutely. I think that's the important part, isn't it? You know, confirming that the minutes, you know, are there.
Yeah.
So just quickly before I go to your question, Sean, some of you may have the CEO review the minutes before the chair of the board. I don't like that. I know that some boards do, some chairs do ask for that to happen, but just bear in mind that they are the board's minutes, and the CEO shouldn't really be making amendments or edits or changes to the board's minutes before the chair, you know, at all. Certainly not before the chair has seen them. And the time frame that we work on here at Absolute Gems is to get these to the board chair within 24 to 48 hours after the meeting, and to have them published to the entire board within 5 to 7 days. Is that the same for you and Joe and Danica? Same for you?
Yeah, working days.
Yeah, working days.
yeah, we work to 3 working days kind of maximum. It depends on what clients prefer.
Yeah. The great thing about using a governance tool, of course, is that it's available anywhere, all the places, anywhere where you want to, and you can log in anytime and get all of that valuable information at your own convenience. So let's go to the questions, Sean.
Okay, so we have just on 5 minutes and we have 20 questions.
Let's go.
The chat, I think.
I think what we'll do is I'll just take some at random and then see if we can't get some answers to these questions after the webinar by some means. So here is one from Catherine. Given a prospective board member may like to review some of the previous minutes, decisions and governance documents to base their decision on joining the board, I have found that they can't view very much on Board Pro as a guest executive. How can they view anything? I think that's more of a technical question than anything else.
Yeah, and yeah, you can send the minutes to external people through Board Pro. I think it gives them 30 days to view that. We use it for auditors who want to look at the minutes and the board papers. So there is a functionality within Board Pro to do that.
Thank you, Danica.
You can also PDF a pack to them, or yeah.
Yeah, as part of their own due diligence, they should be receiving at least the last 3 board meetings as part of your induction process or due diligence process. Yeah.
Kate has a question. Should board minutes record where a potential conflict is discussed? If board agrees no conflict, or when a board member states they voluntarily remove themselves from the potential conflict?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's critical. That is actually recorded. And I would say that Joe and Danica probably follow a similar process to me, which is that that the conflict is noted at the very beginning of the conversation, and how the conflict is being dealt with is noted straight away before the conversation takes place.
One of
Danica,
the core purposes of taking minutes, isn't it?
fundamental, yeah.
Yeah, and in that instance, you would just record that someone had declared an interest and the board discussed it and agreed that it wasn't a conflict.
Yeah, or agreed and agreed that the person would not participate in the conversation and may have left the room, you know, and when they're, you know, and write the time down and the time they come back in as well. Or if you're not recording the time, just you do need to record that they left the room and that they came back into the room after the conversation has been had.
Here's an interesting question. How do you deal with higher executives in the organisation gatekeeping access to the chairman?
What do you mean by that? We don't, you mean
As in the
chairman or
minute?
the CEO?
Do we assume that the minute taker has no access to the chairman? Is that maybe the question?
I think so.
In which case, well, that is not best practice, and you might be able to have a conversation and politely point that out. But I mean, if the chairperson's happy with that situation, that's their prerogative. It's definitely not best practice.
Okay, we've got far too many questions than we have time for, so I think we'll look to wrap things up right at the moment. You all good with that, team?
Sure. So there's a couple of top tips that I have and that the other ladies will have as well. So my top tips for writing professional board minutes are use a product like Grammarly if your company allows it, and make sure that you are writing roles and not names. Make sure that the expectations of your chair are met, and communicate your preference and style and agree that with the chair so that you are giving them exactly what they want. Be confident. This is your area of expertise, and most chairs are happy to be led by that. But do check in regularly if the minutes are meeting their expectations. Those quick check-ins can be so valuable in giving you the feedback that you need to make sure that the minutes are exactly what they want.
Thanks, Jean. Any top tips from you, Danica?
Use a professional where you can, if you can afford it. It just makes your life so much easier. I think for companies, it takes away any complexity within the business. If you're the person in the business that does the minutes, then I think getting them done as soon as possible after the meeting while everything's fresh in mind, erring on the side of less is more, summarizing, no he said, she said, and just look at the resources that are out there if you are unsure on anything. There's a lot of information out there that can guide you.
Joe, from you?
Slightly repetitive, but obviously a key point is get the minutes done pretty quickly so that they are fresh in your mind and that you don't have any memory lapses. I also believe, doing that final review is really key, and putting that lens on to make sure that they're actually useful down the track, because otherwise, what's the point? And try to have a really strong communicative relationship with your chair and your board, and don't be shy, as Jen's pointed out, to actually dial into them, because minutes are subjective. They look different for different organizations, and you want to be giving them the best result. And you can only do that by communicating. So
fantastic.
That's from me.
Team. So just wrapping things up now, we have a great series of webinars in the schedule through till the end of August, as you can see here. I'm sure you'll find something of interest over the coming months. This also includes a number of on-demand masterclasses that I'm sure you'll also find interesting. All of these webinars and courses can be found on our website, which is boardpro.com. So you'll receive an email from us very shortly, which will include a copy of the recording, the presentation slides, the white paper, and the minutes templates as well. Now, just as you leave the webinar today, don't forget to complete our little 1-minute survey. Go in the draw for our hamper. We'll announce the winner probably now tomorrow morning. So thanks everyone for your attendance. I hope you really enjoyed the session. Thanks Jen, Joe and Danica for your great conversation. And we look forward to seeing you all again. Thanks everybody. Have a great day.